Hey everybody, I'm Debt-Free Joel. Welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays. On Wisdom Wednesdays, I try to share a little bit of wisdom that helped me become debt-free and ultimately financially stable. So on today's episode, I want to talk about specifically emergency funds, especially in 2021. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. So what are really emergency funds and why do you need it? Well, by the name you can tell it's an emergency fund, right? It's a fund that you have specifically designed for emergencies.
Well,
Right.
duh.
Well, you're so genius for bringing that up. I know. But seriously, an emergency fund is there to protect you and to protect your wealth, to protect your family. It's in case things happen. So for a lot of you, you may have heard what's called Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law states that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So what do you think is going to happen the minute you start building an emergency fund? That's when your house is going to have a leak. That's when your transmission is going to have a problem. That's when your kid's going to break an arm or something like that, and you have to now have medical expenses. So an emergency fund is there to protect you against things that happen to you, things that are going to go wrong, things that are going to affect your day-to-day life and affect how much money you're going to be able to save. It's a way to preserve your wealth. Every single person should have an emergency fund. I can care less who you are. I can care less how much you invest. That's what helped me become ultimately debt-free, was ultimately first building an emergency fund so that if anything went wrong, and I mean anything, you can withstand the hit and not go back into debt. So how do you build an emergency fund? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to get on a budget. I know, you're not going to like this. But the reason why you build a budget is because you're going to have to know how much money is leaving versus how much money is coming in, right? So for example, if you have $4,000 coming in every month and you spend 3,500, that means you have 500 left over to save, right? Now, the obvious question that you're probably thinking to yourself is, Joel, I don't have money left over after every check because I'm spending it all over the place. I have too many bills. Well, when you get on a budget, you need to figure out your needs versus your wants and start to eliminate some of the things that you don't really need. But once you start to create space in your budget, that's going to dictate how much you can actually save. In my opinion, everybody should be saving at least 10% of their income every single month. This is to me non-negotiable because that's going to be a way for you to start paying yourself first, right? If you watched my shows, if you watched my channel, you know in particular, I will always tell you to pay yourself first. So you need to figure out on your budget how much money you can pay yourself first every single month. That is the easiest way to do it. So if you take 10%, that's 10 cents out of every dollar goes into your savings. Remember, you're trying to build an emergency fund. This is non-negotiable. Get on a budget. And how many months of an emergency fund should you have saved up? I'm listening. Right. It should be 3 to 6 months of expenses. But you decided to click on this face. You know what that means? That you know where I'm going with this. It needs to be at least 6 months of expenses. Yep, non-negotiable. Here's why. All you need to do, jokes aside though, is look at what happened in 2020. Look how many people lost their job. Look how many people, as of the recording of today, right? Let's say if it's in March of 2021, it's been at least 12 months for people with no income. Okay, so in my opinion, 3 months is not it. You can do 6 months and maybe some supplemental government assistance, for example, unemployment that can get you through the other 6 months. But at a minimum, you should have about 6 months of emergency savings saved up. All you need to do is look at what happened in 2020. Now, COVID is not always going to happen every single year, but you're going to have market downturns. You're going to lose your job if something happens, God forbid, and you want to be able to protect yourself. Now, what goes on these expenses? Literally everything. I don't want to hear excuses about, well, I did my budget and I left this off. You need to have everything on your budget so you know what really 6 months of expenses are. Let me explain. I've done budgeting for people for a pretty long time. And the one thing I realize is that they always leave off expenses. You may be watching this video right now and you think that you're on a budget. Here's what I want you to do. Check your budget and see if you have Netflix on there. When you don't, that's what I mean. You need to make sure all your expenses are on your budget. Everything adds up and everything is going to cost money. So in my opinion, have about 6 months of your emergency fund. Make sure it covers everything. If you have kids, make sure it covers everything for them. Don't assume that unemployment is going to be able to cover you during those periods. It should be extra added on. But make sure that you have 6 months. Remember, your emergency fund is there to protect you and your family. This is not a joke. This is what you need to do. Prepare. And there you have it. That's this Wisdom Wednesday's tip for this week. Make sure that you build an emergency fund. All jokes aside, guys, you really do need to have this. There's too many people, especially within the black community, who don't have an emergency fund. And this is one of the reasons why when there's economic downturns, it really hits us the hardest. So make sure you build an emergency fund. I'm Debt Free Joel. Feel free to leave comments below. Maybe you've already accumulated an emergency fund. Maybe you have some ideas on how to accumulate them. Feel free to leave any comments. Also, feel free to also follow me on Instagram. It's the same handle as YouTube, at Debt Free Joel. I put a ton of information on there on saving, on investing, and most importantly on charity. So as always, I will always leave you with this quote. Make sure that a part of all that you earn is yours to keep. I'm Debt Free Joel, and I'll see you next time.